Hel- Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Rich here from the Burning Archive. I am doing a quick live stream today. It's what's the date? It's my goodness, it's the 13th of June 2023. And I just really want to do a quick live stream today. I'm a little bit pressed for time because I am, as you can maybe see here, I am bringing to final publication stage my book, 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. So sort of overloaded with editing and cover design and all that sort of thing to get the book ready, and I'm planning to have it published in July. But I was keen just to pop on briefly in case anyone wanted to jump on and have a chat about my recent article in Pearls and Irritations on Australia, Little Country Lost, which is kind of about the Indo-Pacific and the role of the Indo-Pacific in the grand strategies of American and Australian and I guess Western analysts and geostrategists. And this article really sort of makes a comparison between the free and open Indo-Pacific and the Holy Roman Empire, which Voltaire, the French Enlightenment philosopher, once described the Holy Roman Empire, that is, as neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. And my article in Pearls and Irritations, which is called Australia, Little Country Lost, at johnmenadue.com. And I think I've got a link to the article in the live stream description, so check that out if you haven't read it. That article really sort of says, well, like the Holy Roman Empire, it's neither free nor open, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. The free and open Indo-Pacific is neither free. Is New Caledonia free? Is the Falkland Islands free? Nor open. How can we really say things are open when there's so much control by the US Navy of the big trade choke points of the world, and there are so many economic sanctions applied by America and Western powers against Pacific powers like China and Russia and many other states around the world. That's not really open, is it? And then I finally say it's not even the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, two vast oceans that represent a huge proportion of the world, and shown with a map upside down on the thumbnail for this live stream. The vast water mass of the world, in which Australia is sort of there in the middle, really, of those Indian and Pacific Oceans. So it certainly positions Australia as central, but really the Indo-Pacific is very strangely defined in most the Indo-Pacific is very strangely defined in most Indo-Pacific strategies. It's not really encompassing of all the states and the regions and the cultures and the political regimes, I guess, in all of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. So if you're online, give us a shout out and a chat, show us any questions, let us know where you're viewing from. I'd love to hear from you. But I really just want to give everyone a bit of an opportunity to jump in and ask me any questions about that article as well. And also maybe just update you with how I'm sort of going with my sort of writing and things, and what's next for me, and also what I'm thinking of maybe doing with the YouTube. I've been trying out the live streams over the last month or so, just really partly just to give myself a bit of a break from video editing, because I've spending so much time text editing. But I think maybe over the next couple of months, I might switch back to doing some sort of relatively short videos on the YouTube that kind of focus on explanatory, educational content around history, governments, geopolitics, and I guess trying to explain some of the underpinning concepts, etc., that I will be talking about. And I might even do a few videos about the upcoming book, 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. So leave us a comment in chat or in the comments afterwards if you're watching the replay of the live, whether that would suit you. And whether you've got any particular questions, I guess, around some of my thinking around the Indo-Pacific. So just going back to the article on the Indo-Pacific, one of the observations that I made in it is that the Indian External Affairs Minister, and hi to any viewers from India. I know I've got some subscribers in India, and I think it's like about 9:30 or something like that, New Delhi time. It's about 2 o'clock-ish in the afternoon here in Melbourne, Australia. But the Indian External Affairs Minister is, and if you are watching from India, send us a hi in the chat or as a comment in the replay of the live later. The Indian External Affairs Minister, going back to my main point, Dr. S.J. Shankar, is a very expert and capable foreign minister, one of the best in the world, really. And partly because he used to be a very capable foreign affairs bureaucrat. He was the head of the Foreign Affairs Department, and then he transitioned into being a political minister and leading the foreign ministry from the role of minister in the Modi government over the last 5 years or so. And he has written a fantastic book called The Indian Way, which I've also done a video on the YouTube channel, probably about a couple of months ago. And in The Indian Way, he comments on how can I put this? India is central to the Indo-Pacific, isn't it? And he comments on how the Indo-Pacific has become quite a fashionable sort of new concept, strategic concept in geostrategy, in foreign affairs, in policy at the moment, and he says how lots of people around the world are claiming credit for the Indo-Pacific strategy, including people in Australia, people in America. He has a bit of a dig at Britain, claiming to run a free, wanting to have a free and open Indo-Pacific, when in fact India knew the nature of free and open Indo-Pacific under the British Empire for a couple of centuries and suffered greatly for it. But he also comments that the actual originator of the concept was a German geographer, geostrategist sort of person, Karl Haushofer. And I'm always mixing up in my own head the S and the F. So it's either Haushofer or Hofhauser. My apologies, I just don't have the name in front of me. And in my most recent podcast, the Burning Archive podcast, which you can listen to or watch on YouTube, it's just an audio podcast, and I've just got like a card with it. In that, I have got a bit of a account of Haushofer's original idea and his thinking about the Indo-Pacific, because it was quite interesting, really. He was a German, and after World War One, Germany was kind of displaced from the Indo-Pacific. It used to have colonies like parts of Papua New Guinea and a number of the islands in the Pacific. They used to be German colonies. After the Treaty of Versailles, famously, I think, in Australia, Billy Hughes went to the Treaty of Versailles and insisted that, given Australia's sacrifice of lives in World War One on behalf of the British Empire, it was time for Australia to be rewarded with colonial possessions of its own at the cost of Germany. And he insisted that even though Woodrow Wilson was clamouring for all nations to be self-determined and all that sort of stuff, it was Australia's turn to establish its own little Pacific sub-empire. And so Papua New Guinea transferred from being a British colony, a German colony, to become an Australian colony. And it remained so until in the 1970s. So that was the context in which Haushofer wrote his book, Geopolitics in the Pacific Ocean, in 1924. And in the podcast, I sort of described some of the ideas around all of that. And I guess one of the other things I do in my most recent podcast, which again you can listen to on YouTube or you can listen to on any sort of podcast platform like Spotify or Apple or whatever. One of the things I do is also look at what the real history of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans is. If Australia really wants to define its proper place in the world, it needs to look at the real geography of the Indian and Pacific Ocean, rather than this really weird geography that gets presented in the Indo-Pacific strategy that cuts off half of the Indian Ocean and excludes China and Russia, which occupy a very large part of the coastline of the West Pacific. It really is just a cloak for an American domination of the world. But we need to look at not just the real geography of the Indo-Pacific, but also the real history of the Indo-Pacific. And so I make recommendations for 4 really good books that you can read on the Indian and Pacific Oceans, their real history. One of those books is by David Abulafia, called The Boundless Sea, A Human History of Oceans. And it covers brilliantly the history of the Pacific Ocean, the extraordinary Polynesian navigations and the gradual sort of settling of all that, the extraordinary story of the collaboration, I guess, between Captain Cook and 2 Paia, I think his name was, the sort of Polynesian navigator who mapped the Pacific, and whose map of the Pacific, based on the kind of form of navigation that the Polynesian navigators was documented together with Cook, and you can sort of see it on the internet. He tells that remarkable story, and he tells the extraordinary story of the Indian Ocean, which has long been, he describes it as the middle ocean of the world. It's long been a huge zone of cultural, civilizational trade, migration, communication, I guess. It's really not a plaything for American battleships. It is one of the great civilizational zones of the world, and perhaps we should start to see it in that way here in Australia, rather than just a big empty space for us to suck in more American bases to. So David Abulafia does that, and then he also explains how after 1492 the sort of oceans come into conversation with each other. People are moving between oceans. The Europeans enter this amazing Indo-Pacific world and try to establish their free and open Indo-Pacific strategies, which largely involve, extortionate gunboat diplomacy and military adventurism and empires and exploitations of people. And then after the sort of container ship revolution, just as people are starting to define these ocean-based geopolitical strategies in the early 20th century, flight and the container boat revolution fundamentally changes the actual human interaction with the oceans. He describes it as the oceans contained. We sort of have, if you like, escaped the boundaries of the ocean. It has become a boundless sea. And again, I think that is relevant to how we conceive the idea of the Indo-Pacific strategy. So that's one of the key books. Another key book is a history of kind of trade and commerce and civilization in India from the Islamic period to 1750 by N.K. Chowdhury. I just don't have the title in front of me. I was poorly prepared for this live stream. And this is based on Ferdinand Braudel, the famous sort of historian of commerce, who wrote these sort of the Mediterranean in the age of Philip II. His book about the civilization, the culture, the economy, the economic civilization of the Mediterranean that bound together these people in different countries into a common sort of mingled civilizational world. And in many ways there's a similar kind of dynamic happening across the Indo-Pacific in these 1,000 years or so between the rise of the Islamic period and the coming of the Europeans, particularly the conquest of India. So it's a very rich book to give you a sense of that. And then there is a third book, which is Dr. S. Jaishankar's book on the Indian Way, which has a brilliant chapter on, I think he calls it the Pacific Indian, that sets out how India sees its role, its maritime role, and its role in these oceans. It doesn't really it's kind of begrudgingly accepts the fact that people will want to talk about the Indo-Pacific, but doesn't invest too much in it, and then sets out his role. And I mean, Dr. S.J. Shankar is one of the key players in international relations today, and I think anyone who really wants to understand what's going on the world stage, then I think reading Dr. S.J. Shankar's book, The Indian Way, is a really great thing to do, and it provides a lot of rich insights into the self-understanding of a leading Indian diplomat, or the leading Indian diplomat, into India's role in the world, India's role in the Indo-Pacific, as well as providing a very subtle and sophisticated understanding of international relations and the conduct of diplomacy in today's world. A highly recommended book. And then finally, there's a fourth book whose title I just can't remember offhand, but if you listen to my podcast, you will see it there. And if you subscribe to my weekly newsletter at jeffrich, jeffrich.substack.com, you'll also be able to get all the detailed references to all these books as well. Free weekly newsletter comes out every Saturday morning, and it's called Glimpses of the Multipolar World. And I sort of talk about what I'm reading, what I'm sort of working on, some issues to do with governing the unruly multipolar world, some fragments of the burning archive, what surprised me most in the week, and the big story of the week. So that's my newsletter, and yeah, it's got all the details of these letters. But anyhow, this book, which I think has got something like it has waves in the title. That's all I can remember. This is pathetic. Let me just double check what the title is here. If you can just bear with me for one moment, I really ought to. Not just do it all from memory, but if I'm just going to have to quickly consult my own Substack newsletter here in order to do this properly for you. Let me see. Let's have a look at this, shall we? So yeah, Glimpses of the Multipolar World, 10th of June 2023, and actually I refer in this also to a brilliant interview done by Abhijit Chavda, a very popular sort of YouTuber, Indian YouTuber on geopolitics and things. He did an interview with the former senior Indian diplomat Kanwal Sibal, which really gives deep insight into India's view on the world. So House Hofer, his name is. So Jaishankar's The Indian Way, David Abulufia's The Boundless Sea, K.N. Chowdhury, Trade and Civilization in the Indian Ocean, An Economic History from the Rise of Islam to 1750. That's a book from the 1980s, but it's a brilliant book. And then finally, Sujat Sivasundaram, Waves Across the South, A New History of Revolution and Empire, published in 2021. And this book even includes discussion of good old Australia. Always exciting to see Australia mentioned in world history. A pretty unusual event, but occasionally it does happen. And this book, Waves Across the South, describes the age of revolutions in the Indo-Pacific Oceans, from the viewpoint, if you like, of the then global South, the peoples of Australia, the peoples of India, the peoples of, I think he talks about Mauritius and Madagascar maybe, or Mauritius, and other parts of the Pacific Ocean, and he flips the usual story of the Age of Revolutions, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the various revolutions in Europe in the first half of the 19th century, the growing democratic franchises, I guess, or liberal franchises in those European nations as well. He kind of flips the script on that a little bit and describes how there was, I guess, resistance to a lot of the European settlement, and it gives a very different, a fascinating and insightful story of the Indo-Pacific. So if you'd like to check out my most recent podcast, which I have on platform and also on the YouTube platform, as well as on the general sort of normal podcast platforms, with apologies to YouTube, then you can do that. And you should also check out my article on the Indo-Pacific at johnmenadue.com. Now, if anyone is online and they want to send us a chat, or if you're watching on the replay, leave us a message, a comment. I don't see any chats there, so what I might do is bring the stream to an end there. I think I wanted to commit through to this one because I said I would do this one. But I think from next week, I might just be posting short, more history educational type content videos relevant to geopolitics, but not so much the kind of daily news kind of thing. I do short videos. I might be doing a few more book reviews, that sort of thing. Combined book reviews. I might even do a little video version of my recommendations for the histories of oceans, and I'll do those. Do like one short weekly video. And I might do some more live streams in a month or so, when I will have completed publishing, yes, this book, 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. My writings on government over 20 years ago while being a bureaucrat. It is a pretty unusual perspective. It's not a perspective you will hear in most places, and I think it's one that will interest a lot of people. So maybe when that is done and out, I will do some videos about the book, about how I wrote the book, and also maybe some live streams to get subscribers and whatnot to the channel. People are interested in what I have to say can ask me some questions about the book and some of the fascinating things that I saw in 33 years as a very, very minor government official. Okay, thanks for joining me, either live or in the replay. I will be back shortly. Wish me luck in finishing my book and doing all the last-minute proofing and design things. And I will see you not live, but in short edited videos on the channel next week. And best wishes all, and do take care.